The coffee was already cold by the time Owen Calloway noticed it. That was the kind of morning it was. The kind where you pour a cup, set it on the counter, and then spend the next 40 minutes making lunches and signing permission slips and finding the left shoe, always the left one, before you remember the coffee exists. He drank it anyway. Cold, a little bitter, the way things get when you've been too busy to tend to them. His daughter Priya was 9. She liked grape jelly, but only on one side of the bread. His son Danny was 6, and going through a phase where he refused to wear socks with seams. These were the things Owen knew. These were the coordinates of his life on Whitmore Avenue in a 2-bedroom rental with a broken gutter he kept meaning to fix and a backyard just big enough for a second-hand swing set. He was a middle school science teacher, had been for 11 years. He drove a 2014 Civic with a dent in the rear bumper from a parking lot incident he didn't want to talk about. He was 39 years old, and most nights after the kids were asleep, he sat at the kitchen table and graded papers in the quiet, and that quiet was, if he was being honest, one of the better parts of his day. He wasn't sad about his life. He wanted to be clear about that, even if nobody was asking. He'd built something real, something that worked, even after everything that had happened, even after Claire. But this story isn't really about what happened before. It's about what happened on a Tuesday in March, when a woman named Sylvia Montague walked into the gymnasium of Kessler Middle School and changed the coordinates of everything. The city had announced the project 6 months earlier. A mixed-use development, retail on the ground floor, luxury condominiums above, to be built on the block that currently housed, among other things, a dry cleaner, a barbershop that had been there since 1987, and Kessler Middle School. The schools wasn't supposed to be demolished. That was what the city said at first. They would relocate it to a building on the east side of town that had last functioned as a storage facility and still smelled, according to parents who'd toured it, like industrial solvent and old carpet. Owen had gone to those early meetings. He'd signed the petitions. He'd written the letter that the school newsletter called impassioned and that his department chair called career limiting. He didn't care. He'd watched what Kessler meant to his students, kids who walked 6 blocks each morning because it was the closest thing to stable they had, and he couldn't make himself be quiet about it. The developer behind the project was Hargrove Capital Group. The man at the top of Hargrove Capital Group was a person named Franklin Beauchamp. Owen knew the name the way you know the name of a weather system that's been on the news for a week. Abstract, powerful, coming your way. He did not know that Franklin Beauchamp had a daughter. Her name was Sylvia Montague, her mother's name, kept after a marriage that had lasted 3 years, and she was the company's director of community relations. She attended the public meeting at Kessler on a Tuesday evening in March because her father's assistant had put it on her calendar, and because she was, professionally speaking, the person Hargrove Capital sent when they wanted someone to listen to a room full of angry parents without the company appearing to be made of stone. Owen saw her come in. He noticed the way she moved, not nervous, not defensive, but careful, like someone who'd been in difficult rooms before and knew how to read them. She sat in the back row with a legal pad and wrote things down. She didn't check her phone. She didn't sigh when people got emotional. He was standing at the microphone when he first really looked at her. He was in the middle of a sentence about test scores and the psychological research on environmental stability and academic performance, and she looked up from her notepad, and for a moment their eyes met across the gymnasium in a way that had nothing to do with zoning ordinances. He finished his sentence. He sat down. He told himself it didn't mean anything. She found him afterward by the folding table with the coffee urn and the cookies that the PTA had brought. That was a good argument, she said. She wasn't being sycophantic. Her voice had the flatness of someone saying a factual thing. It's a true argument, Owen said. The research is solid, I know. I read the same research. She poured herself a coffee. I'm Sylvia Montague. I work for Hargrove. He looked at her. I know who you are. Then you probably think I'm the enemy. I think you work for the company that wants to put my students in a building that smells like motor oil. Fair. She wrapped both hands around the paper cup. I want you to know I'm not here to manage you. I'm here because I think there are parts of this that haven't been handled well, and I'm trying to understand what those parts are. Owen studied her for a moment. He'd been to enough of these meetings to know the difference between corporate listening and actual listening. Sylvia Montague was actually listening. The East Side building, he said. It's not fixable. It's not a relocation. It's a displacement. Half my kids live within walking distance of this school. If you move them across town, you lose them. She wrote something on the legal pad, not in a performative way, in the way of someone who doesn't want to forget. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Do you believe we're going to build this development regardless of what anyone says at these meetings? He paused. Honestly? Yes. Then what do you want from tonight? I want it on record, Owen said. I want someone from your company to have heard it. Really heard it, not just filed it. He looked at her. I think maybe you're the first person from Hargrove who actually has. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, I'll call you this week, not on behalf of the company, just to talk about what options might actually exist. He gave her his number. He drove home. He relieved the babysitter, checked on the kids, did the dishes, sat at the kitchen table with a stack of quizzes about the water cycle. He thought about her handwriting. Precise, slanted slightly left. The way she'd said regardless of what anyone says at these meetings, not unkind, just honest. The particular honesty of someone who was tired of performing certainty they didn't feel. He graded 7 quizzes before he realized he'd been thinking about her the whole time. She called on Thursday. They talked for an hour and a half. She'd pulled the original site plans and found a modification, a smaller footprint for the ground floor retail that would allow the school to remain in its current building if the city agreed to renegotiate the boundary line. It wasn't guaranteed. But it was real. Why are you doing this? Owen asked. A pause. Because I work in community relations. This is my job. That's not why. Another pause, longer. No, she said. It's not. She didn't explain further. He didn't push. Some things you wait to understand. They met twice more over the following month. Coffee the first time at a place near the school. Dinner the second time at a restaurant she chose, quiet and a little out of the way, and he noticed she'd picked somewhere that didn't feel like a power lunch. He told her about Priya and Danny, about the grape jelly and the socks. She laughed, not politely, but genuinely the way people laugh when something surprises them into it. She told him she'd been divorced for 4 years, that she spent her weekdays in boardrooms making arguments she sometimes only half believed, and her weekends doing things that had nothing to do with development projects, cooking, gardening, reading novels on her back porch in the city, that she was 41 and had recently started to feel the distance between the life she was living and the life she was actually interested in. What kind of life is that? Owen asked. She thought about it. One that's smaller, she said. In a good way. Less square footage, more. I don't know. More actually there. He knew exactly what she meant. He didn't say so. But he thought about it for days. Franklin Beauchamp found out about Sylvia and Owen in the way powerful people find out about things they weren't supposed to know, through someone who thought it would be useful to tell him. The call came on a Sunday morning in April. Sylvia was at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and a novel. Her father didn't call often. When he did, it was usually efficient. This call was not efficient. I need you to tell me, he said, whether you are having a personal relationship with one of the community organizers at the Kessler Project. Sylvia set down her tea. His name is Owen Calloway. He's a teacher, not an organizer. That's not what I asked. Yes, she said. We've been seeing each other. The silence on the line had a texture to it. She'd known her father for 41 years. She knew what his silences meant. Sylvia. His voice was measured in the way of someone keeping something larger contained. You understand what this looks like. I understand what you think it looks like. You're the company's face on a contested development. You are personally involved with a man who is publicly opposing that development. This is not a perception problem. This is an actual problem. Owen's position on the school hasn't changed because of us, she said, and mine hasn't either. I found a modification to the site plan that might let the school stay. I sent it to legal last week. I know you did, and it complicates things. It solves things, Dad. It gives the city a reason to sign off without the community fight that's going to cost us 6 months and a front-page story. Another silence. I want you to step back from the Kessler Project. I'm the Director of Community Relations. I'm aware of your title. then you know I can't step back from a contested community project without it raising exactly the questions you're trying to avoid. Franklin Beauchamp was not accustomed to people who could match his logic with their own. He'd raised one of them, a fact he seemed to find simultaneously gratifying and inconvenient. "I want you to end it," he said. Sylvia picked up her tea. It had gone cold. "No," she said. The word got around the way these things do in professional circles, carefully, partially, with just enough detail to be damaging. By the second week of May, there were people at Hargrove who referred to Owen in meetings Sylvia wasn't in as the situation. There was talk of reassigning her. There was a conversation between Franklin and the company's legal team that she heard about secondhand, and that involved the phrase conflict of interest 3 times in 20 minutes. Owen knew some of this, not all of it. Sylvia told him what she thought he needed to know and spared him the parts that were, in her assessment, above the operational threshold of worry. He found out about the full scope of it on a Wednesday evening when he came to pick her up for dinner, and she answered the door in the clothes she'd been wearing since morning, which was how he knew. "Tell me," he said. She told him. The reassignment discussion, the legal conversation. The fact that her father had called 2 more times, each call shorter and more pointed than the last. When she finished, Owen was quiet for a moment. "I'm going to ask you something," he said, "and I want you to answer it without considering me. That's not how I make decisions. I know. But try." He looked at her directly. "Is this job as Hargrove what you actually want, not what you're good at? What you want?" She didn't answer right away. She walked to the window. The street below was doing its ordinary evening things. Someone walking a dog, a kid on a bike, the corner store with its lit sign. "No," she said finally. "It hasn't been for a while. Then what are you protecting?" She turned around. Something in her face had shifted, not broken but released. Like a thing that had been held tightly for so long the letting go felt strange. "I don't know," she said. "Habit, maybe. The idea of what I was supposed to be building toward." Owen walked over to her. He didn't say anything for a moment. Outside, a car alarm went off briefly and then stopped. "The modification you found," he said. "The one that keeps the school. Does it work?" "Yes, it works." "Legal knows it works. Then it doesn't need you to protect it anymore. It can stand on its own." She looked at him. This man with the cold coffee and the grape jelly and the left shoes and the water cycle quizzes. This man who had stood at a microphone in a gymnasium and said true things without calculating the cost. "My father," she said, "is not going to understand this. Your father is a very smart person who built something real," Owen said. "Smart people can change what they think. It just takes longer when they've been right about a lot of things for a long time." Franklin Beauchamp came to see Sylvia on a Friday in June. He called ahead, which was unusual. He drove himself, which was more unusual still. She made coffee. He sat at her kitchen table in a suit that cost more than Owen's monthly rent and looked around her apartment the way he always did, noting what was there, cataloging what wasn't, and for a moment he didn't say anything. "The school modification," he said finally. "Legal signed off. The city accepted the revised boundary. Kessler stays." "I know," Sylvia said. "They called me Wednesday. I wanted to tell you in person." He picked up the coffee cup, set it down. It was the right call. The community relations argument was sound. "We avoided what would have been a very expensive public fight. Yes, I'm saying you were right." Sylvia looked at her father. He was 70 years old. He had built 3 companies from the ground up. He had outlasted 2 recessions, a market crash, a lawsuit that had lasted 7 years, and 1 marriage. He did not say you were right easily or often. "I know it wasn't just about the project," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "No! Are you going to tell me what you think about Owen?" He looked down at the coffee cup, back up at her. "I think," he said slowly, "that I made assumptions about him based on the position he was in, rather than who he actually is, and I think that was not the most rigorous analysis I've ever done." From Franklin Beauchamp, this was the equivalent of a full apology. Sylvia knew that. She accepted it the way it was offered, without ceremony, without making him say more than he was capable of saying. "He'd like to meet you," she said, properly. Her father picked up the coffee cup again. This time he drank from it. "The children," he said. "Priya and Danny, yes. How old?" 9 and 6, slowly. "Priya likes grape jelly." Sylvia smiled. Only on one side. Something moved across her father's face. Not quite a smile. Something more complicated than that. the face of a man beginning late and imperfectly to revise. Owen met Franklin for the first time on a Saturday in late June. Sylvia had suggested something neutral, something without the weight of formal occasion, and so they met at the backyard of the house on Whitmore Avenue, where Priya and Danny were taking turns on the second-hand swing set, and the broken gutter was still, as it had been for 11 months, unrepaired. Franklin stood on the uneven patio in the same expensive suit and watched the children. He didn't speak right away. Danny fell off the swing and immediately got back on without crying, which was a Danny thing, and Franklin watched that too. "She talks about them," he said to Owen. "I know," Owen said. "She's good with them." Franklin looked at him. The look of a man doing the thing Owen had told Sylvia smart people could do, changing what he thought imperfectly, with difficulty, but genuinely. "I won't pretend I didn't have concerns," Franklin said. "I know you did. I'm not entirely without them now. That's fair," Owen said. "I'd think less of you if you weren't paying attention." Franklin was quiet for a moment. Then, "She's been unhappy for a while. At the company. I knew. I didn't want to know, but I knew." Owen didn't respond. "Some things don't need a response. She's different," Franklin said. "When she's here, different how?" He looked at the swing set. At Priya, who was explaining something to her grandfather about the aerodynamics of swinging. She'd been studying the water cycle unit and had branched out. And at Danny, who was watching a beetle cross the patio with the focused intensity of a small person who has found something genuinely important. "Smaller," Franklin said quietly. "In a good way." "What's that word? Smaller." "In a good way." He paused. "I thought I knew what she meant when she said it. Now I think I know better." Franklin Beauchamp was not a man who was moved easily or publicly. But standing on an uneven patio in a too expensive suit, watching his daughter laugh at something a 6-year-old had said about a beetle, he was something. Something that didn't have a name in the vocabulary he'd built his life inside of. He stayed for dinner. Sylvia cooked. Owen set the table, made the grape jelly appear only on one side of the bread, located the left shoe, and opened a bottle of wine that was ordinary and unpretentious and cost $9, which was what Owen had in the wine budget that week. Franklin drank it without comment. Afterward, the kids were in bed and the three of them sat at the kitchen table in the kind of quiet that is not empty but full. Full of things said and unsaid, of ground that had shifted, of the particular exhaustion that comes not from fighting, but from something harder, from choosing deliberately to stop. "The gutter," Franklin said, looking out the dark window. "I know," Owen said. "I could send someone. I'd rather fix it myself." Franklin looked at him. Another revision, small and quiet, taking place somewhere behind his eyes. "All right," he said. And that was the end of the evening and the beginning, tentative, imperfect, genuinely there, of something else. There's a thing that happens sometimes, not in movies but in actual life, where the ending isn't a resolution so much as a new arrangement. Nobody wins exactly. Nobody loses exactly. Things just find a different level, the way water does. The school stayed. Sylvia left Hargrove 3 months later. Not dramatically, not with a speech, just with a resignation letter and a box of things she'd kept in her office, mostly books. She consulted independently after that on projects she actually believed in for clients she could look in the eye. Franklin called her every Sunday. He didn't call as often those Sundays about business. Priya found the left shoe under the couch. It was always under the couch. And Owen, on a Tuesday evening in November, fixed the gutter. He did it himself.